Next, we move to consideration for approval of the district crisis plan.
I don't think you can conditioner shut up.
Oh, there was a separate one.
You'll have to give Chris
More than every crowd in there. Thanks, God. How's the temperature?
It's getting a little cold.
Getting cold?
You have to wear more layers.
We can open a door. That'll make it.
No,
Gotta
we
get focused.
can't open the door, Mr. Nash.
We can do anything we want.
If Dave's not here.
I hope you've had a chance to take a look at the proposed crisis response plan. When we, I'll figure out where I'm at here. There's just a slew of different handouts here. I mean a slew, but if we look at the table, start with the table of contents. You can see in there's a using the comprehensive school guide, the 4 phases of emergency planning, which are mitigation and prevention, preparedness, response, and then recovery. And what our plan is going forward now, we've met with the administrators and they reviewed it, or we reviewed it with them, and we're looking for holes in the whole system. And we will be meeting, I believe, on the 26th or 27th next week with our emergency personnel and looking for more holes. We will be asking our building administrators to take these back to their safety teams and look for more holes. And then once we've gathered all that information, we will take what we have, which is right here, put that together in add or make the modifications to this in response to what they bring us, but and then ask for you to approve the document in its entirety in September. If that makes any sense. And we should know, though, even once it's adopted in September, it is a comprehensive document. And when you talk about prevention mitigation, we're talking about what we do in schools to prevent bad things from happening before they even happen. You know, what kind of programs do we have in place for kids so that they're proactive rather than reactive. You know, the best example would be what we probably do K through 2, and that would be the help me, brain lock, the
Protected behaviors?
no, that behavior intervention, the second step that we do with the second step curriculum, and it really teaches how kids need to interact with other people. That's in its basic form. Very good program, and then we carry that forward through the high school, you know, different programs. One of those programs that transition kids from the middle school to the high school would be the LINK program, getting them prepared to take that next step. So it's just not, all right, you're in 8th grade, now you're a freshman, you walk in the building, and you're waiting for all the upperclassmen to pounce on you and do all those things that probably we all heard were going to happen when we were freshmen. And the preparedness and the planning is basically looking at the National Incident Management System and tying off what we do at school here with our emergency responders. Of course, we know if we need to involve our emergency responders, they're really going to take charge, and then we will be a subgroup of their incident command system. You know, they will be dictating to us what we need to do, and we just need to know how that's all going to flow and how that's going to happen. But then also kind of developing our own internal incident management system for those things that don't need those types of responses, which are far more likely than if we would ever need them. And again, the response is what we want to look at tonight a little bit. And we'll go through that section very briefly, but if we were looking for you to approve anything, it would just be the response section at this point in time, because that's what we're going to do in the event of a crisis. Okay, that's what's going to happen. And the crisis can be, you know, use your imagination. It can be as simple as the power going out in the building, and we have to evacuate the building and go to another school. Where are our rally points? Where are we going from here? to, you know, as severe as a fire in the building. So, and then the final piece is really what we will be looking at is that's a behavior health and recovery procedures. Because after the crisis, there's really an ongoing or a developing crisis that starts to happen, you know, in response to the crisis, and that's the whole recovery piece, getting kids back to their parents, monitoring students. If it's, you know, a tornado takes down a building, what are we doing in response to that? Do we have our insurance together? Do we have the finance? Where are we going to continue education in response to that crisis? So really that's the one that can get sometimes lost in the whole discussion and can be just as important as the crisis itself. And again, you can see in the appendices, there's a lot of different things that we're doing. Building site surveys, tactical site surveys. When we talk about tactical site surveys, that's really going around and looking at the buildings, not just from a perspective of safety as far as intruders or things like that, but looking at it from is simply if you're walking down the sidewalk, is there a uneven cement, you know, in the sidewalk where you have to take care of that to a slippery spot. So it's really looking at building safety in a more comprehensive outlook on it. And then again, we have some crisis management plans, and probably the big one on here is the Toma Area School District Violence Prevention Strategies and Practices. What we spent, you know, the better part of 5 or 6 meetings last spring developing and making sure that people understand that. And as we discussed with the administrators is, you know, one of the big ones is, you know, we will have panic buttons in each of the buildings. When do you push it? I mean, if you start thinking about that a little bit, when do you push it? Because it's going to bring a response. And as much as we hate hitting that panic button, we may not like that response. Because and that's where that discussion between emergency personnel and the school district really need to be talking and have a good understanding what that response is. Because they have no clue what they're coming into. There is no two-way communication. So they're probably going to assume the worst. And I think if I was in their shoes, that's probably what I would assume also. So when I ask that question now again, when do we push the button, it starts to take on a little bit more complex meaning or thought maybe when we're going to push the button. In the end, it's a good thing. I'm not saying that, but there's just got to be some good discussion about that. So if we go back, we just you know, briefly take a look at response. Response is what do we do in the event that we have a crisis? It's going to tell us what we need to do. There's really 5 universal procedures: evacuation and relocation. That means we're getting out of the building, we're going somewhere else. Now, depending on the type of crisis that's going on in the building, we may or may not relocate. You know, if a crisis is a fire alarm getting pulled, that doesn't mean that we're going to relocate. It just means we're going to ensure the building's not on fire or there isn't a problem. So that's really evacuation, relocation. Lockdown, you know, there's different types of lockdowns. There's lockdown with warning, there's lockdown with intruder, and there's lockdown may be implemented by any staff member if they feel that there is an imminent life-threatening danger or threat to the health, safety, welfare of any person in the building. So a lockdown with warning occurs when there is a threat outside the building or there are non-threatening circumstances that people need to be kept away of, you know, e.g. Medical emergency or disturbance in the hallway. All right, we're locking down the building, do not leave your classrooms. And then you have a lockdown with an intruder, means that, you know what, you're locking your doors, you're staying there and you're waiting. So these are just basically the universal procedures how administration and staff will deal with these. Again, the next one would be a reverse evacuation. What do you do if all the kids are outside at lunch at the high school? Well, you're going to have a reverse evacuation. How are you going to make sure that's orderly and done as quickly as possible? So that's what you're talking about in the reverse evacuation. Then you have your severe weather shelters. You know, where do you go? What do you do? And they're all uniquely different. And then finally, the last one is a shelter in place. So what we will do, each staff member will have it will be a legal piece of paper back to back with all 5 of those universal procedures on it. And then another sheet that basically has emergency contact numbers on it, just in case, you know, they're by themselves or whatever the emergency might be. But then Again, another big piece of the whole response is student reunification and release. We know what it's like when we have a tornado warning in our buildings. We know what it's like trying to keep track of students in a tornado warning. We will have parents flock to the school to get their kids out of the building as the tornado warning's in progress. So, we'd prefer that they not come to the school and ride out the storm. There's probably no safer place at that moment in time. They're probably risking more by coming and getting their child and then leaving the building, but we understand that's a parental decision. So, but you can, I don't know what just happened there, but of course the bigger the crisis, the more issues and more concern, your emotion, good word, Cindy, that you're going to have. So we've tried to lay out a plan. We've tried to inform parents with a letter that will be in the handbooks of what they should do in a crisis. But bigger than that, we need to know what we're going to do. How are we going to reunify those students with their parents? Because we're not just going to give kids to anybody. You have to have I'm really not doing anything. You're going to have to unify those. I'm really lost. You're going to have to unify the kids with their parents, and that's just not, again, handing them off. You want to have documentation to. That's all right. That's all right. So, and then we have specific things that might happen in the school that you're going to have specific responses for. And when we get to those areas, again, that's the job of the administrator to decide how they're going to respond to those specific incidents. The job of the staff member is to respond to them through the universal procedure as you're looking at those different things there. So what I think at the very least we should approve tonight then, if you're okay with that, is the response section of the crisis management. The other things really in the end are just I don't want to say guidance things, but they're things that we would do regardless if we had this plan or didn't have the plan. But the response is really kind of gets the heart of what we're going to do.
I'll make a motion to approve the response section of the district crisis plan as presented.
Okay.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve the response section of the district crisis plan as presented. Any questions or comments?
I know last month, Mr. Gorder, you said this is always, and it will always be, a fluid document. You're always looking for changes and improvements. So we always will keep that in mind too as we review what's happened and what the response is. It's a lot of work. You put a lot of effort and work into this whole project.
And that's really a we.
Yeah.
We've put a lot of work. Everybody on that crisis team and everybody who participated in the spring in those meetings. But yeah, this has been a big undertaking for us.
And I do want to say it's very similar to items that the VA has in place also as far as their response to crisis and the different types of different situations that you can be involved in. So I know Mr. Hennessy's wife is probably well aware of all of these, and so as I am. So you're on the same track exactly that the VA is. So I think they're probably well proven methods and ways to respond. So.
It's been made easier because I don't want people to be under the impression that we didn't have a crisis plan. We had a very good crisis plans. It's just that there's been a lot of things that happened since we adopted the crisis plan that we had, and there are just some new things we need to be thinking about. So.
Will this be reviewed on an annual basis? Or, is there...
I don't know if the whole document in its entirety would be reviewed on an annual basis. Certainly, once the NIMS system is in place, the preparedness and planning, we're pretty much good to go. The mitigation and prevention is really, we'll look at the documents we might be using in that to see if they work this year, but once we get a good sense of where whether those are working or not. Really, the prevention mitigation you guys deal with as a curriculum committee and a board on an ongoing basis. You see those programs that we have in place. You know, if anything, it was a good reminder for us to really do an inventory of what we are doing. So, and one of the appendices in there does really put that out there for us to take a look at. I'm not sure which one it is anymore, but you can take a look at that. It kind of throws it out there. And then, you know, obviously in the recovery, behavioral recovery, there are some templates that are out there for, you know, again, after the crisis is over, is our response can vary. But the thing you need to do, and again, from a little bit of experience and seeing some of these things unfold, different things that have happened, is making sure you're sending a consistent message to everybody, because you want to kill the rumors before the rumors get legs. And the way you start rumors is by sending inconsistent messages where somebody's saying, well, my teacher told me this, or my teacher told me that, or I heard Mrs. Zardy and Mr. Gorder saying, you know, this, and this. We want to make sure we have a very, you know, concise message and truthful message, you know, that you're sending out there to ensure that people are getting the information that they need.
Appendix C.
Appendix C, yeah, Tome Area School District Violence Prevention Strategies and Practices.
And then this, I mean, I guess this gets disseminated to staff in a somewhat deliberate way. It's
Each
not,
building has a crisis team in the building, and their job is specifically to go over these documents,
Okay.
and then to have staff meetings with the building administrator will have staff meetings, and we'll go cover these things with each staff member.
it's not just sending a memo out to staff
No.
saying, we have a new plan, please review it at your convenience.
Yeah, and the crisis teams will meet probably on a quarterly basis at a minimum.
Good. That sounds really good. Okay.
Again, our biggest challenge with this will be communicating what we did in the spring and getting that system in place with some of the security enhancements that we've had.
Protocol access for when people can move throughout the building voluntarily or on their own when people can't.
Okay. Any other questions? We have a motion and a second to approve the response section, at least now, for the crisis plan. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The ayes have it. That motion carries, and so the response section is approved, and then we'll revisit the other sections, or...
We will come back in September.
Oh, for
and,
those.
and if we don't approve them in September, if you don't feel comfortable and you want to look at those suggested changes, we can come back in October again. It's the response piece that's really the big thing that we get implemented.
Okay.
The other stuff will not change a lot. It will be really just technical changes.
Okay. And it was, as was stated before, thanks for all the work on that. It is an important component of the school district.